I recently sat down with the great Ron Coleman of Coleman Nation to talk about striking writers taking aim on an antitrust basis, begging the FTC and the feds to come in and take a look at Disney, Amazon, and Netflix in the midst of their continued writer strike, now in excess of 100 days. Make sure you check out the live show today at 6 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, August 20th, as Mr. Coleman should be joining us for more conversation on this topic and many others. Here we go. Renegade Online. Well, folks, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's great to see everybody out there once again. And if you're like one of the many folks that are watching this video that may not yet be subscribed, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray, hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. I am joined today by the one and only, the great Ron Coleman of Coleman Nation. Welcome aboard, sir.
Why, thank you so much, Valiant. Great to talk to you again.
Yes, it's great to see you, and I want to thank you again for having me on a couple of weeks ago to do an interview on your podcast. Had a great time, and we'll post the link to that again in the description of this video. Hope everybody checks that out.
I appreciate it.
This is something that I think you're very familiar with, something up your alley, and that is a proposed by the WGA, who is currently striking against all of Hollywood, is suggesting that lawmakers look into the Walt Disney Company, into Amazon, and to Netflix under AntiTrust guidelines. It's a report they put out earlier in the day, and of course, they're really kind of dropping the hammer. The WGA and SAG AFTRA, the Actors and Writers Guilds, have been striking now over 100 days collectively, and they have a lot of demands of Hollywood studios. They want them to basically waive all future rights to using artificial intelligence. They want to force studios to have...
You're skipping completely over the intelligence, right? I mean, that's out the window.
Yes.
I mean, I think we've understood that for quite some time. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Just the artificial part. But I mean, they also wanted to have minimums on things like so many writers in a writer's room for a show if it's a certain size. I mean, there's all these arbitrary things that they're demanding, and now they're adding this. And I don't know if this reeks of a bit of an act of desperation on their part, because I think that maybe they feel like their strike isn't working, and it really isn't. Hollywood studios have already guided towards the fact that they've already invested in artificial intelligence, and they're not backing down. So now this comes out with this antitrust action. So as just a quick setup, what this is basically saying is that, you know, these studios have become the gatekeepers for all of this, with writing, with production. You know, the streaming services have gotten so large that they're going to lock people out. They're going to lock a competitive practice, the free market, out of Hollywood production. So, Ron, what is your kind of overview take on this so far?
It is... to see something like this going on, you know, at least it's just a report. Mm-hmm. You know, you'll often see something that someone will breathlessly report, X sued Y for $30 billion.
Mm-hmm.
For $30 billion is the made up part. It's the part where the lawyer who wrote the complaint said, and I think that this is worth $30 billion. You can say that. Well, I practice actually in New Jersey. You're not allowed to make up numbers like that in. But they didn't even do that here. They wrote a report. That isn't dropping the hammer, okay? That's maybe pulling a screwdriver out of the garage. It's nothing. A report. If you believe that there's an antitrust violation here, that the antitrust laws have been violated, you run to court. They know they're not going to win if they file such a lawsuit. And I once had the privilege of suing Google for its antitrust practices in connection with the Google Play Store. Google's problem is gatekeepers to media. We're speaking on Valiant Renegade on YouTube. There has never been a freer market, and YouTube sucks. YouTube censors. Having said that, there are more entertainment options for more people than has ever been the case before. Where were these guys when Google was acquiring every technology in the world and then either sunsetting it or folding it into its own services, but vastly undermining its capabilities? Now they're worried about. I mean, and again, their concern isn't that whether or not consumers are getting choice, right? Their concern is whether they have the ability to use the coercion that is the premise of organized labor. And it's understandable why you'd want to do that if you were in the position of not being capital, but being labor. Although in Hollywood, that's a very odd distinction to make, at least at the high level. But look at YouTube. Look at all the creativity. Look at all the options. So even someone like you, and heck, I'm even allowed on YouTube just so no one watches me. Fine, okay. But a guy like you, with his own point of view, and not particularly good looking, frankly, is able to. There is. I mean, what? And that's why they didn't sue. Amazon. Like Amazon, what's the effect of Amazon on? I mean, you know this better than I do because you follow the entertainment business from a commercial point of view. But as far as I know, Amazon is a distributor of a certain amount of media, but compared to a major film studio, they produce. They're players, but the more you talk about this, the more you realize what a weak argument this is. What they want is the ability to use the coercion of a work stoppage to get to get concessions that the market will absolutely not provide for them, because there's a lot of talent out there. Now, are the studios going to start ignoring the actors union? No, that can't happen. That's not going to happen ideologically. Back in the day, back when you were in knee pants, if then. The New York Times, there was a strike at the New York Times, and they just very quietly one night packed up and moved all their operations to New Jersey. Not their newsroom, but all their manufacturing. They just, it's a very common thing for companies that talk a good leftist game and a good organized labor game. When it comes to their money and their control over the means of production, they get very capitalistic very fast.
Yes. Money at the end of the day wins out, right? Even if it's other people's money.
I've heard. You're right. It would only have to be other people's money.
And I think you're right on the money. I think that the actors and the Writers Guild are leveraging the strike right now to get maximum attention. I mean, if the WGA had put out this report 6 months ago.
Ooh, a report.
Yeah. 8 months ago, I don't think anybody would have really paid attention. But now, this is where it is. And the reason, I think, as you alluded to, and correctly, is that they're going after Disney, number one, because, well, Disney has always been engaged in creative accounting practices. It always borderlines and scrapes the edge of maybe not legal in some cases. But many studios engage in the practice of creative accounting when it comes to how much did a show make? How much did a film actually make? There's always two sets of books, right?
Oh, my God. Two sets of books.
There's the books that the studio has. They know what they really made. And then there's the set of books that they show the folks that have actual residuals and participations in those projects. That's why directors,
that's why
producers.
You always get a piece of the gross.
Exactly. Gross points like Tom Cruise. Never the net. Never the net. Always the gross. Because you can't argue the gross. But in this case, they name folks like Disney. They name Netflix because Netflix, in terms of sheer volume, Netflix is probably the biggest consumer of professional content out there to feed that beast. Not necessarily that produces the biggest results in terms of revenue when compared to film and theaters, but in terms of quantity, they consume an enormous amount. And Amazon is in that game too. And of course, Ron, you know as well as I do that if you're going to bring up an antitrust issue and try to get the federal courts involved, get the Federal Trade Commission involved, you usually want to come out with the big guns and point them at the biggest people on Wall Street and the NASDAQ. And in this case, you got Amazon and Netflix. It doesn't get too much bigger than that. Apple probably would have been named, but for the fact that their Apple streaming service is still in its nascent stage. But if they had 70 million subscribers for Apple TV that were avid watchers, they'd probably get named in this as well. But what they're going...
Sad.
Yeah.
It's pretty sad. I mean, and I'm looking now, you brought this to my attention a few hours ago, and I did a Google search for Writers Guild Antitrust. So here's this story we're looking at now, Hollywood Reporter. Number 2, Reuters, 3 hours ago. Number 3, LA Times, which is basically the Hollywood official newspaper.
Yeah.
Then it gets real thin, real fast. There's Variety, Courthouse News. Okay, everyone gets into Courthouse News. This is not a big story. This is not a big threat to America. This is not a big threat to a Main Street America. This is entirely an internecine battle among very, very wealthy people in Hollywood. The very wealthy actors who are in some respects among the leadership in this labor dispute are speaking on behalf of those who do not have the voices and the power and the following that they do. I get that. And that's appropriate, and that's as it should be. But at the end of the day, here's a terrible secret. And as someone who used to actually kind of be an actor, I can say this in all sincerity, even though really acting is really hard, most Americans don't really think acting is work. It's not fair. It's not fair. But they're not going to get a groundswell of public support. But this is a BS claim. There's no antitrust. Of all the industries, in a world where there's more media, there's broadband, and even a regular schlob like me has a Shure microphone and a ring light, and look, I even have makeup in my desk for the bald spot. Okay, there's no monopoly on media, and
that's it.
Has demonstrated to us Disney might have a monopoly on incredibly expensive bad media.
Yes,
but I don't think it does.
Here's the crux of the issue. This is the actual 15-page report, just so everybody sees it. The new gatekeepers. This is from the Writers Guild of America West. This is the Hollywood WGA. And this is the crux of their argument. The rise of streaming video over the past decade provided some amount of increased competition and a greater diversity of content than ever before. However, deregulation and mergers have laid the groundwork for a future of increased market power.
I don't even know what deregulation they could be referring to.
I think what their perception, based on what I've read in this, is that the fact that the regulators, the federal regulators, allowed, for example, the Walt Disney Company to acquire Fox Studios for $72 billion.
Yes, there has been a change.
Or that Amazon bought MGM's library for about $9 billion.
There's no question and I've spoken about this and written about this, the Federal Trade Commission and the Antitrust Division of the Department of Justice don't really seem to consider themselves as having jobs that require them to do anything anymore. That I would agree with. But deregulation is a strange choice of words, because guess what? There hasn't been a change to the antitrust statutes, or for all practical purposes, the operative regulations in generations. And what you're reading here, what you really see here is they're not, you see, the hardest thing to do as a plaintiff, and that includes the government, in an antitrust lawsuit, is identifying and demonstrating rigorously what the market is. And what you see here is word salad.
Yes.
What's the market? Well, acquisitions, film, networks, media, what's the market? Is there anything that I can't get online?
Mm-hmm. Well, listen to this. Let me read this, because I find this language very creative. And Ron, I think you're right on the money again, because remember, this is crafted by the WGA. This is crafted by people who literally write fiction for a living. This is not crafted by, I mean, I'm sure there was an attorney or general counsel for a WGA that had some input or some compliance oversight to a degree. But this is WGA. This is where they are. Listen to this. However, deregulation and mergers have laid the groundwork for a future of increased market power that could soon leave just 3 companies controlling what content is made. They have zeroed in. They have literally, in this report, they have thrown Universal Studios, Warner Brothers Studios, and Paramount Studios, not to mention people like Lionsgate, who are mid-majors and climbing the ranks, and Skydance and all these other folks. They've left them out. They're saying that eventually it's going to be Disney, Amazon, and Netflix. This is what the argument they're trying to make.
You know who else they've left out? Mr. Beast.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. But from a standpoint of who needs professional writers, right? We're talking about professional Hollywood productions. Positioning themselves to be the new gatekeepers of media, growing through acquisitions and using increased power to disadvantage competitors, raise prices for consumers, and to push down wages for creative workers. Pay and working conditions for writers have become so dire, their language, and media conglomerates so unresponsive. That's because we've been on a strike for 100 days, and the studios are going, fine. That 11,500 writers went on strike in May 2023. Without intervention, these conglomerates will seize control of the media landscape, and the streaming era's advances for creativity and choice will be lost.
Stopped listening about 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just a buzz. Are they saying that we're supposed to consider ourselves fortunate that Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny got in under the wire? Is that their argument?
Yes. You know, look, here's the thing, and this is the other part of this, Ron, that's so funny. And we're going to I would love having this conversation Sunday in the live show. The other part of this is the studios have said, look, we can't agree to the terms they're putting out there, but we are happily feeding the market what they want by buying turnkey product from overseas. And that's what they're doing. They're all doing it. They're all buying product from the UK and mostly, Ron, Korea and Japan right now to feed the streaming services. They're like, there's plenty of stuff out there. What are you talking? There's tons of competition. We got stuff everywhere. We're going to go buy it somewhere else on the global market. But look at what they tout for each company. This is what gets me. Disney has grown through a series of multi-billion-dollar acquisitions, using its power to reduce film output.
If only.
If only, right? Exactly. Shut down competing studios, foreclose independent content from its distribution networks, expand control of the labor market, and force creators to give up financial participation in future licensing revenue. Now, there's some merit to that, to a degree, especially on the residuals, but that's the changing landscape right now. But they're all also changing again at the same time, bringing advertisers back into streaming services. They give the same thing on Amazon. Gained a sizable footprint in media in a short time, utilizing well-documented playbook critical to its ascendance as a tech company through anti-competitive behavior and vertical integration. Amazon has harmed competitors, privileged its related business, and abused employer leverage to underpay writers.
The verb is privileged, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
This is the world we're living in today. Okay, go on. No, sorry.
That's what I'm saying. The WGA wrote this. Netflix was once an innovative competitor. Right? Now we don't like them anymore. We loved them when Netflix was throwing money at us right and left for the last 10 years. And they still are. But now we don't like them anymore because they're not paying us residuals. Well, they didn't agree to residuals up front when they contracted with Netflix. They were happy to get that big fat Netflix check. And now they're mad that they are not getting stuff that they didn't agree to get in the beginning. But anyway, it's now using its position, Netflix, as the largest streaming service in the world, to abuse its leverage as an employer decrease innovative content spending, and raise prices for consumers. The company has cut out independent producers and severely underpaid writers in multiple areas, and a series of recent acquisitions signal its intent to further increase dominance and market power in order to reduce innovative content investment. Again, this is just a bunch of boilerplate pablum that it's just... my brain is fried reading it.
And I mean, like typical, I hate to say it, but typical union rhetoric, it completely disregards, as you point out, both the reality of technological and economic change that requires businesses to stay competitive by utilizing better techniques for production. Mm-hmm. And it ignores the fact that if indeed, let's remember something. One of the big axioms in antitrust law is the antitrust law is not meant to protect competitors. It's meant to protect competition. Mm-hmm. If an unlawful agreement or an unlawful restraint of trade results in reduced competition, that's actionable. But if it puts you out of business and that's your complaint, that's not actionable.
Right. That's just free market forces at work.
And what they're complaining about is that we're not getting our share anymore of the goodies. Mm-hmm. And what's the antitrust harm to to competition? The studios are putting out crappy stuff. Dude, the crappy stuff they put out was all written by you.
Exactly.
AI could not do worse. Could not do worse. It's a losing battle, and it's pathetic. An antitrust report? I mean, if you got the goods, file a case.
Right.
You ain't got them.
No, they wrote this report to appeal to the better nature of the FTC. And hey, y'all should take a look at stuff and things. And I mean, that's kind of what they're hoping with this.
The FTC is in a world of its own. And it's fascinating because these are the people who, when they're working in their jobs in the studios and in these major media conglomerates, are used to having control over the message. Mm-hmm. In fact, what we've seen in recent history is, and I mean the last several years, writers have been telling the studios, I don't want to hear about your bottom line. We'll tell you what consumers should like. Mm-hmm. And we're going to write crappy content, but it's the right thing to do because we know what's good and just and all the things. Here, Hollywood is actually stepping back from that and saying, we can't keep bleeding money on our media content like this anymore. Things have really taken the novelty of streaming. Streaming has completely changed. I mean, they don't seem to even recognize that streaming has fundamentally changed the way all media are consumed today.
The writers are realizing that, we're doing a lot more stuff. We're making a lot more stuff because we have to feed the streaming beasts. But they don't seem to understand that, most of the stuff that's being pumped out is nothing more than cannon fodder, number one. Number two...
Or write-offs, even worse.
Yeah. Most of it isn't worthy of even any kind of residuals. Again, because you look back at 30 years ago, writers and actors and producers and all this kind of stuff, they got checks for years based on what they did. But there was also 1/10, maybe not even 1/10 of the amount of content that's being pumped out today between all of these massive online services. Most of it is here today, gone tomorrow. This is a very short window, type of society. It's the TikTok generation, right? You've got the attention span of a gnat or a mosquito in Louisiana in the middle of summer.
What this document, and we've only seen a snippet of it, and it's not the true legal analysis, and et cetera, with all those caveats, It doesn't wrestle with the reality that distribution of media content is essentially cost-free now.
Mhm.
And that's a gigantic difference from the world when you had to sell tickets, you had to print copies of reels of motion pictures, you had syndication agreement. Remember syndication?
Yep.
It's a thing of the past. Like all the old arrangements don't make sense anymore. Now, look, again, I'm not being particularly sympathetic to Hollywood studios. They're the worst people in the world, and they're ridiculously wealthy. And they, like most American corporations, the main concern in the C-suite is feathering the nest of the people in the C-suite. Everything else comes after that. In New York, okay, out my window here, you can't use, if you put on a show on Broadway, you have to have live musicians in the pit because of work rules.
Yeah.
What does that mean? In addition to the incredibly high cost of everything else in New York, you also have to have Teamsters unloading every truck and moving every Fresnel and every Klieg light. Everything has to be so great having work rules. What do you have on Broadway now? A bunch of Disney crap.
We've had all the streaming companies in the last just 4 weeks alone effectively announce price hikes. I got a notification this evening before I came on here. YouTube Premium is going up $3 a month.
Yes.
Just like along with Netflix, by the way, and Disney Plus and everything else.
As much as I hate YouTube, institutionally and morally and ethically, I recognize the amazingness of it. Antitrust claims against these three companies are not going to be the magic pill or the magic bullet that is going to save the Hollywood writers from a certain degree of obsolescence.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think this antitrust plea is really going to go anywhere. Now, I know the FTC, and we've talked about this because we've had a lot of questions about, will Apple buy Disney outright? And I said, look, the likelihood that would actually come to fruition is pretty close to zero, short of some massive stripping down of the Walt Disney Company. And of course, federal regulators have guided towards the fact that they would be very unwilling to entertain something of that ridiculous. We're talking about 2 Dow Jones 30 components here that would be merging or one buying out the other. That seems very unlikely. But, I mean, this is the kind of thing that, like you said, the landscape is changing. The actors and the writers can scream about this all they want, but instead of trying to change with the times, instead of actually trying to make themselves more marketable, instead of trying to make themselves to the point where they are indispensable to Hollywood studios by producing quality content, they've just decided to scream, hire more of us and pay us more money so we can keep producing the same trash that's going out there now. It's funny to me, Ron, that guys like Taylor Sheridan, who have been producing some of the highest quality and the most popular television shows out there of the last couple of years. He's the guy that developed Yellowstone, which was a huge hit for Paramount and then by distribution Peacock, and many other shows. Everybody regards Taylor Sheridan's quality of work as peak Hollywood right now in terms of show running for television. Taylor Sheridan was looking at some of these demands that the WGA was making and said, if I have to sit here and pass my work that I'm creating into a room of 8 people I don't know and don't give a crap about, I'm going to quit. So here's a writer, the most preeminent writer and showrunner in Hollywood, arguably, that says these demands are patently insane.